When you know that you are queer, but your favorite drink is beer, that's gayish. You can bottom without stopping, but you can't stand going shopping, that's gayish. Oh, gayish, you're probably gayish. Well, life's just too short for narrow stereotypes, so it's gayish. We're also gayish. It's Gayish with Mike and Kyle.
Hello, everyone in the podcast universe. This is Gayish,
the podcast that makes you queef, but in a good way.
Oh, God.
That's from Dave.
Wait. I don't think I can queef, can I?
Yeah, butt queef?
Can you queef out of your butt?
I'm sure.
I'm Mike Johnson.
I'm Kyle Gayest.
We're here to bridge the gap between sexuality and actuality.
And today...
I'm still very confused by the anatomy.
Butt queef.
No. Don't tell me what to do, Kyle. We're going to talk about queer youth.
We're going to talk about queer youth.
Instead of queefing.
Instead of butt queef.
And definitely not at the same time.
No.
No. But first.
But first.
Oh, but first.
But first, I have an update.
Spell butt.
Spell first.
You have an update.
I have an update.
What are you updating us on?
I am back on Grindr.
Are you? You got reinstated.
I got reinstated. My ban has been lifted. They told me that the ban was accidental or incorrect or whatever, and now I'm back on Grindr.
Okay, hold on.
What?
Were you actively trying to get back on Grindr?
I submitted an appeal ticket.
How long ago?
A couple times. This latest one like a week ago or something.
Okay. This time it's stuck.
This time it worked out. Art from Grindr responded to me and said it was, they made a mistake.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, watch out, boys. I already had a listener message me on Grindr.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Our listeners are very creepy.
Don't say that about this person.
Oh, no, I mean, it's just true and they know it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now the news?
Yeah.
Shut your mouth hole, it's time for your ear holes. News.
News the first. So, okay. This whole thing about like Kamala Harris is just a DEI hire.
Oh, right.
And like that now people on the right they get to say DEI instead of the racist or homophobic thing that they really want to say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there are a bunch of companies who recently have told, made statements that they are going to be discontinuing some portion of their internal DEI efforts.
Oh, no.
So the right wing has been railing against DEI, which if you don't know, maybe English isn't your thing, I don't know. But diversity, equity, and inclusion is what DEI stands for. And a lot of companies, especially the big Fortune 500 ones that you've heard of, have programs in place to do that. DEI.
To DEI as a verb.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this dude named Robbie Starbuck who's just a dickbag fuckface asshole candidate. Put him on the list. He is a failed filmmaker and failed congressional candidate, according to The Advocate. But he's been sort of leading the charge here. He thinks that companies shouldn't sponsor pride events, that they shouldn't have any policies about their trans employees and their rights. He's also against anything that fights climate change.
Oh, God.
He's just a real winner. He also thinks that toxic chemicals turn people queer and that the COVID-19 vaccine is what killed Matthew Perry. But Wow.
I wonder, toxic chemicals turning us queer, that sounds like a superhero, like the start of a superhero.
I mean,
kind of thing. I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I think there's something to that. Let's explore that. Yeah. What if that were true? Yeah.
Would you spray it on like everyone that you thought was hot?
Ooh, good idea. I'd spray it on myself, make myself even more gay.
Yeah, great. Gayification. Anyway, the following companies, I'm not like, despite the tremendous power that we hold here at Gayish Media LLC, I'm not calling for a boycott, but I do want you to know some of these companies and the things that they have done. So Ford Motor Company, they leaked an internal memo in August that said that they are going to back away from, quote, commenting publicly on the many polarizing issues of the day, which you can read between the lines and figure out what they're talking about there. But they are not going to. Yeah, they're not going to participate in Pride. John Deere, they make tractors, and they said that they're no longer going to participate in or support external social or cultural awareness parades, festivals, or events. that category of
Oh
things.
yeah, all the parades that we always support, all of them are going away.
They're consolidating all of their business resource groups or employee resource groups to just be about professional development, networking, mentoring, and supporting talent recruitment efforts. So like you can't party.
I guess not.
You can't hang out. Anyway, I'm sad about this one because I shop there sometimes. Lowe's. Lowe's is no longer going to participate in the HRC Corporate Equality Index.
Wow.
And they're also going to consolidate their internal employee support resources groups.
Is this just all to like help eliminate HR positions that now that they want to save some money?
Maybe.
And it's trendy to do that now?
But I mean, why? Okay, but why focus on the DEI part? Like, if you just want to fire a bunch of recruiters because they're terrible people, then go for it. They're not terrible people. My ex-wife was one, so I just by the community property of my marriages.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Harley Davidson, they suck. They're pulling out of the HRC index, and that they are removing all socially motivated content. That's a quote from their employee training materials. Brown-Forman, they make Jack Daniel's whiskey. They are pulling out of the HRC index and would, quote, end quantitative workforce and supplier diversity ambitions. And this is the All Lives Matter horseshit. They say, quote, we will continue to foster an inclusive work environment where everyone is welcomed.
Right.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Okay, Tractor Supply Company. They are abandoning all DEI initiatives. That's the list that I have, at least from The Advocate. But like, it is, I think, always about money. It's always about the bottom line. And these companies have determined that it is better to kowtow to the right and end their DEI initiatives than it is to have them and make the left happy, because the right is so angry. They think that DEI programs or DEI pronouns are going to trans their children.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway.
It feels like the pendulum is swinging back the other way from 2020, when everyone was like, oh, we need to actually like step up and talk about Black Lives Matter and talk about the disparate treatment that we have, with Black people in our company and the issues that they face uniquely. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah. Everything sucks. Everything sucks, Kyle. News the second.
Great.
Okay, great. So there is an event that I was not aware of that I'm kind of excited about called Global Black Pride, and it's in Atlanta. This is it's held every 2 years, and it started in 2020. So this is only the third one or whatever. Anyway, Global Black Pride in Atlanta started this week. And they had a really troubling incident of vandalism on their first day.
Oh, no.
So late Tuesday night, an intoxicated guest at the Starling Hotel, where the event is being held, allegedly broke into the event space and caused significant damage. They overturned vendor tables, merchandise, and educational materials were scattered across the floor. And according to The Advocate anyway, quote, in a particularly offensive act, the suspect defecated on a pride flag.
Oh my God.
Which I think I would have led with that if I were writing the story.
Yeah, that's like overturned a table and also shit on a pride flag. I guess if you're drunk, then you can. I can't. I'd be too poop shy.
Like, you can't poop on command?
I don't know that I'd be able to go into a room and poop on a pride flag, like just willy-nilly.
It reminds me of when it was spring break of my like junior year of college, I think, junior or senior year. And we drove to Lake Tahoe, and there's State Line Avenue in Lake Tahoe is the California-Nevada border, and I had a fraternity brother who wanted to poop in 2 states at the same time, and I thought he was going to give himself a hernia because he was like, he couldn't poop on demand.
Do you have to like save?
Oh my God, it was one Baldan. We know one Baldan.
Oh, from episode whatever,
4 or whatever.
early episodes. Wow.
Anyway, the Atlanta Police Department has responded to the scene, is engaged with its LGBTQ liaison unit to assist in the investigation. No arrests have been made, but they're actively following leads. And it was
what a shitty thing to do.
Literally shitty thing to do. I just think about like all of the brouhaha around like burning the American flag, and like the right loves flags.
Yeah.
Like in their mind, that's probably the most magical, horrible thing that you can do.
Yeah.
I just think it's gross.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's gross and mean.
The pride flag is going to be fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Not that specific pride flag.
Yeah,
Hopefully that
maybe-
one went to the trash.
Yeah, or a really good dry cleaner.
Oh, no. You give up at that point. No.
News the last.
Yeah.
So the Mormon Church, known formally as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it has released new anti-trans policies in an updated church handbook that came out last Monday. So this new set of policies bars trans people from working with children, becoming clergy members, or teaching. The handbook does try to mince words a little bit by saying that trans people, quote, often face complex challenges and should be treated with sensitivity, kindness, compassion, and Christ-like love. I just joined a new Facebook group. It's like, there is no hate like Christian love is the name of it. It's really, really great.
Yeah. Yeah. Like treat them with Christ-like love by discriminating against them.
Right, exactly. Quote, church leaders counsel against pursuing surgical, medical, or social transition away from one's biological sex at birth. Leaders advise that taking these actions...
Oh, boy.
I just had an excommunication. Leaders advise that taking these actions will result in some church membership restrictions. These restrictions include receiving or exercising the priesthood, receiving or using a temple recommend. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like, I don't know, it passed to an orgy.
Okay.
And serving in some church callings. The church has never been friendly to trans people, but this definitely is an escalation.
That sucks.
Trans members will also face the possible annotation on their membership records, grouping them with churchgoers who have committed incest, sexual predatory behavior, sexual violence against children, and embezzlement of church funds. Apparently, there's like,
Wow.
they stamp your passport in some weird way that means you're a member of like the baddies.
Yeah. And of course, they categorize us amongst pedophiles and incestors.
Yeah, and now I feel bad because we're going to have Jorge Valencia on the show, who's a Mormon. And,
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, okay,
Yeah.
that's the news.
That's the news. Speaking of people that we...
Wear special underwear for.
Sure. I want to thank the following new Patreon members. Thank you to Evgeny Petrov.
Evgeny Petrov?
I don't know.
That's a Russian name.
Okay. Das Lasagna. And Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Nailed that one. If you want ad-free episodes a day early, if you want bonus content, if you want to use Mike's hole,
Use my hole.
yeah, and a bunch of other cool stuff, go to patreon.com/Gayish podcast.
Yeah, do it.
Do you want to talk about queer youth?
In the least pedophilic way possible, yes.
I'm glad you clarified, because who knew what our intent was going into this?
So for the Patreon segment, we're going to talk about our own experiences as queer youth, but we have a guest on the show today who is an expert.
Yes. We have Jorge Valencia, who is the executive director and CEO of the Point Foundation, who was both a queer youth himself. And Mike is pointing. That's a very funny visual joke, Mike. It's very helpful for this podcast. What was I saying? He's both been a queer youth and works with queer youth, so has a lot to say on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we have him on, do you? We settled on queer youth as what we wanted to call the episode.
Yeah.
Why did we do that?
Because gay youth is just about gay people, and we wanted it to be more inclusive, and queer is the new inclusive word that includes everyone.
You hear that, everybody? Queer's the word.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Did you have any other?
No, it seems like pretty often we throw the Q word around and somebody gets upset that we shouldn't be using that word. And I just want to say that if this very attractive man in his 60s can use the word queer, you can too.
This was also a survey request.
What was it?
Yeah. So someone who did the survey asked us to talk about queer youth.
Yeah, we sent out a survey like a million years ago.
It's like a year and a half.
Okay. And we're still using those ideas. So thanks to everybody who participated.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Let's have George on.
Let's have George on.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Let's take a break.
Break.
This is the part where Mike and Kyle take a break.
So are we back?
We're back.
We're back.
I almost said we're going to do our Gayest and Straightest.
We're not. That's later.
That's later. We are excited to welcome Jorge Valencia, the executive director and CEO of the Point Foundation, here to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Now, let's just start off with your name. You were telling us before we started recording, but it is spelled Jorge, but pronounced George. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm a junior to begin with, so didn't even get my own name. But, my parents grew up at a time when there was a lot of racism against Latinos in the United States. I guess that still exists in many areas.
Boy,
and
howdy.
my parents really wanted to ensure that we didn't get bullied as much as others possibly. And so rather than have people not understand how to say the name or pronounce it correctly, they just always called me George. And mind you, both my parents are from Mexico. And we would speak with my mom in Spanish and with my dad in English. And that's how we separated both of the languages. And then when I was in trouble, then it was Jorge Eduardo Valencia Jr., the whole thing. and George just stuck. And so that's what it is.
I have maybe a weird question then. If that was from early in childhood, do you think of English as being masculine and Spanish as being feminine because of tying one to your mother and one to your father like that?
That's interesting. No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I also... And I know you've done segments on on Mormon. I grew up Mormon as well, and I served a mission in Brazil, and so that really screwed up my Spanish because they're so similar. So at this point, it's all alien, I guess. But I know I don't see the gender that way.
Okay. Well, another question about gender. I've seen several references to you as being Latine. And so there's Latina, Latino, and then Latine, which I've seen as sort of a replacement for Latinx lately. Can you tell us about that movement and where you've landed on it for your own label?
Yes. So I just go with Latino. Okay.
Sure.
I'm an old guy now. And so it's like Latino and Latina. When Latinx came out, it was mostly a very academic group of people that came up with that. And the truth is that there are a lot of people just don't want to be referenced as Latinx. That was mostly a US based type of, designation. Latine, okay, it could go either way. So that's why people started adopting Latine at the end instead of an X.
I mean, Latinx kind of sounds like, I don't know, like a chemical that you turn into a superhero if you ingested it, right?
Latin superhero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my last thing about like identity, I guess, unless Kyle has more. So you're a gay, Mormon, Latino. I didn't know that those three things were allowed to be together in one human.
I'll throw another one who grew up in Texas, just like Kyle did, in South Padre Island area. So,
oh, cool.
I grew up in the Mormon faith. My father was a missionary and baptized my mom and her family. And so by the time we came around, that's the only religion we really knew. So, and you're right. It's people often look at that and think, whoa, like if that's not a few strikes against you, what is? So it's a lot.
Yeah. But can I ask, what's your current relationship to the church, to the faith?
Yeah, I'm not excommunicated from the church. Uh-huh. They could if they wanted to. I haven't gone in many, many years. My family is all very active still in the Mormon faith. And I'm married, so technically they could excommunicate me. There was a period there where there was a little bit of talk around it, but I used to be the executive director and CEO of the Trevor Project, which is, is a suicide prevention helpline for gay and questioning teens. And Utah has a very high rate of suicide among LGBTQ students. And on top of that, I've dedicated my life to helping young people and basically stay alive and get an education. And I think someone told me once that probably wouldn't look good PR wise, when all you're trying to do is help individuals whose Mormon families have rejected them and they shouldn't. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that growing up in an interview, you said that you didn't feel like you fit in with the white kids because you were Mexican. You didn't fit in with your own people because you weren't Mexican enough. Can you talk a little bit about how you didn't fit in with each of those different groups?
Sure. So my mom is very light skinned. She has German in her, the green eyes. My aunts have blonde hair, blue eyes. And if I hadn't been in the sun the last 3 months, because I love it, I know y'all aren't all beach people, but I am. And it's one of those things that I was very light skinned. They called me Coco because of a coconut. I was so white. Uh-huh. And I would often hear kids talking about me behind my back. And as soon as I spoke up in Spanish, it freaked them out. But there was that part where I didn't really fit in that way because either my skin color, my features, maybe, I don't know. And then at the same time, I was Mexican. My name alone said that. And so among, white students, I didn't fit in there either. So it was kind of an interesting place.
Yeah. How does that affect you growing up then? Did you learn to deal with that, or has that affected kind of some of the work that you do now?
A lot of baggage. No, I think it's, look, the good thing, if I had to, is that it's really allowed me to sympathize with people with multiple identities that don't fit in one particular place, whether it's that I don't fit in one area being not Mexican enough or not white enough, if that's what they see me as, or Mormon, Texan, whatever it is, gay. So all of it's kind of, interesting, but I think it got to a place where I was very proud of knowing that I could kind of walk into spaces and be accepted in a way that maybe others couldn't. So I found it as an opportunity to educate if it was possible.
That's a very positive spin on what could be a very shitty thing that you had to deal with growing up.
Yeah. Well, it's true, but growing up and knowing that I was different at the time, I didn't identify it as gay in my mind. Like the idea of a guy liking another guy wasn't even in like the realm of possibility for me. And it's interesting now. So I was a loner for the most part. And looking back now, the kids that I hung out with were, and sure enough, just, 10 years ago, I found out that my closest friends are gay as well. And kind of found ourselves in an area where, again, it was in South Texas, where you go in elementary and it's still the same school district when you graduate, as a senior. So it's the same people I grew up with the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when did you come out? When did you have a realization that that's what was different and that you couldn't not live your truth or whatever?
I came out when I was 28 years old. I was living in Washington, D.C., and living with a roommate from Brigham Young University as well, because I went there. And I don't know, some weekend, I think he said, he loved music to begin with. Like Madonna was his thing. I should have known. But anyway, exactly. And he was lovely and said, hey, we should go to this club. I hear they play great music. Isn't that always the case? And we did. We went to this club called Badlands in Washington, D.C., no longer around. And I recall walking into that room and seeing all of these guys that I could relate to for the very first time in my life. It's like, oh my God, like that's me. And that's me here. Up until then, I grew up in a small town in Texas where, the only person I knew was different was my mom's hairdresser, Gino. And you're too young to remember, but he had a Dorothy Hamill haircut, and that alone was like, all right, that's just not me, So I didn't connect those two, that difference with possibly being gay. And then I went to Brigham Young University, and again, there, you're in a bubble, a Mormon bubble that doesn't accept gay people. So that was the first time in Washington D.C. that I recognized it was very powerful, very scary at the same time, and exhilarating. I mean, all of the feelings that one can expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, you walked into a gay club while you were closeted.
I did. He didn't tell me it was a gay club. He just said it was a club. And there was not a single woman in there. And I found that exciting, for the first time. And I'm like, okay, now I'm getting this. Yeah.
Yeah. What has your family and friends' reaction been to you coming out?
So friends was easier unless they went to BYU. And
Okay.
I was living this double life. I would go to church, when the night before I was out at the clubs. I didn't drink, so it's not like I was showing up with a hangover at church. And with my parents, it was not very easy at all, in fact. And I shared it with my mom and dad, and then I left. I remember that now. My mom was in the kitchen. I said something. I said, I want you to know that I'm gay. And then I just thought, all right, I'll talk to you later. I'm like, they need to sit with that for a while as my mom was crying. And they tried to do everything they could to understand if perhaps it was a phase, but you had a fiance and you had girlfriends in college and, all the dreams that they have, on their side. And they did convince me to go see a therapist. You guys, this is like in the 80s. All right. So again, it was like this whole idea of going to a therapist, which is conversion therapy. I did not know it at the time, was pretty scary, but I avoided that. And it's something I'll always be grateful for, but I agreed to go see this church therapist of theirs. And it was in Maryland. I drove out to the office. I got there early, so I sat in my car for a while. And as the clock got closer and closer, I was like, it was like 10 minutes till, 5 till, the hour hits. And I'm still not getting out of my car. And it's like 5 minutes after 10 minutes. And then I thought, why would I go in there? There's nothing wrong with me. And I drove off and went home. And so that didn't please my parents. And for close to 2 years, we didn't speak. All good now, though. All good.
Well, how do you think they made that switch from trying to get you to see a therapist to acceptance?
I pretty much let them know that if they weren't ready to accept all of who I was, that was their problem and not mine. And therefore I chose not to go home for the holidays or visit them. And I left it for them to decide what kind of a relationship they wanted to have with me. And they eventually came around, still with its bumps, I have to say. And I'm married now. My partner and I have been together 27 years. And they didn't attend our wedding about 8 years ago. And, it was still tough for them, but neither did my husband's family. So he's part Egyptian and part Irish, and the Egyptian side wasn't very cool with it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about like cultural challenges when it comes to the queer community. You mentioned Egyptians, and that's not a society that's really known for being very queer friendly. How would you rate the Latino community in terms of like writ large their relationship to the queer community?
It's definitely better now, I'll say. And we go to the number one spot, Puerto Vallarta, year after year, because, it is My mom's from that state, from Jalisco to begin with, and so I feel a connection to that as well. But it's different. Growing up, it was not. I mean, there were constantly jokes about gay people and being called a maricon, which is a faggot in Spanish, and just living with that all the time. And I don't see that as much. I think it maybe depends on where you go. The areas that we've been to, and my family knows, my cousins do, and they've never said anything negative about it. What they say behind my back might be different, but it feels different.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's maybe pivot a little bit. How did you arrive then at advocacy? Like you've done so much work with Point Foundation, moving backwards to Trevor Project. Like what's the origin story there of how you got so involved in advocacy, especially for queer youth?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. For me, it's been a personal decision every time I've taken a job and it comes from a very, I guess, maybe selfish way of trying to fix what's maybe perceived as broken at times, or I perceived as broken in me. But the way I got involved with the Trevor Project is that my husband was a volunteer for them. They were in their third year of existence, and they had an event, and he did fundraising for them as a volunteer. And I attended this event with him, and I was bawling just hearing the statistics, because years ago at BYU, I had made a pretty stupid decision myself. I lived through it, but it was at that time I saw no light at the end of the tunnel. And so I completely got why an organization like that existed. And I was just moved. And that event raised more money than it ever raised, enough that they were going to hire their first full-time employee that wasn't a founder or a board member. And I, submitted my resume. They took a chance on me, and I was there 5.5 years before Point Foundation came knocking on the door. And with Point Foundation, I will say I said no actually 4 times to Point because I loved what I was doing. Although people started to think my name was Trevor, and that's when you probably know it's time to move on. But we would go out there and go, "Hey, Trevor." It's like, no, not really. But yeah, when the thing that I recognized and realized when I was at the Trevor Project was that most of the young people that call that helpline don't have role models. They don't have people that they could look up to, at least, not 22 years ago when I was there, or so, a little longer actually. And like I said earlier, they just couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, believing that ending their life is the only option for them. And when I got to looking into Point Foundation and the young people that they help, specifically these young people who've been through these difficult periods and are now excelling in school, and now alums that are, they're attorneys, they're professors, they're filmmakers, they're so successful. I recognized that was the answer, that the young people that Point Foundation supported were actually the light that the Trevor Project kids needed. And I thought it'd be really good to focus on the light this time rather than always in the stark space. And I've been now at Point 17.5 years. Long time.
Wow. Can you just give us an overview of what the Point Foundation does?
Yes. Point Foundation is the largest scholarship granting organization for LGBTQ students. We provide financial support through scholarship. We provide mentoring, leadership training, and what's really needed more than ever now is community. So we provide them with a community that continues to support them, and they support each other through the years.
And what kind of ages do you typically support?
So as long as they're attending a community college, an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree or even a postgraduate degree. And we just recently launched a vocational scholarship as well. It really, that's what it's about. So really at any age that you fit into one of those, we will consider.
Including minors, like high school kids that do Running Start are in a undergraduate program.
So if they're still in high school and taking college courses, we don't do that. But there are many that graduate at 16 or 17, and we will support them as well with scholarship.
Sure. Yeah. That's really cool. I'm curious. So having been there long enough now to sort of see the trends, how are things different for queer youth today than they were when you started at Point Foundation 17 years ago and some change?
There are a lot more out. My goodness, the application numbers just skyrocket. They're coming out at a younger and younger age. There are television shows, there are role models now that they can look to on TV or on podcasts, in magazines. There's just so many more resources that just 20 some years ago weren't there. People that are in visible roles or visible professions are coming out, and that's a good thing for young people who may feel very alone. And at the same time, it is scary for them because the people that are not accepting or even not tolerant are really fighting harder than ever to just squash their identities.
Mm-hmm. Especially trans people lately, right? Like that's, at least subjectively, it feels like they're the favorite target these days for the opposition.
Totally.
Is that, well, let's start with community. You mentioned community, which I wanted to dig into a little bit of, like, what are the ways in which you build community for these folks? But can you speak to the trans experience in the last 4 or 5 years, especially as politics have heated up?
Yeah, I think the visibility of the trans community has just really skyrocketed, and good for our trans brothers and sisters that are really going out there and just identifying who they are. Not, some of them still live a stealth life that you don't know, that they are trans, depending on maybe when they started, their transition. It all depends. But it's definitely become more visible, and I think it's an easy target for the conservative folks. It just they grab onto anything that might seem salacious, like the bathroom stuff, the bills and stuff, and it's just like, seriously, like, all you want to do is go take a leak, and you're concerned about that, but it's like that kind of mentality, or the sports thing, which is it's a big conversation right now, and what that looks like. But you have to consider that as a trans individual who always have known that they identify in a certain way, how can you reject that, And so, So in terms of the community, if you're asking, so we're supporting about 755 students this year. Last year was 575. So it continues to grow. Just 4 years ago, it was 80 students. So that is very rapid growth. And we're very proud of that, very happy about that. The need is still huge, with over 3,000 young people applying every single year for just one of our scholarship programs. But what we do is we hold some in-person conferences. We just had one in Washington, D.C. A couple of months ago. And then we have some virtual conferences. We have group mentoring that allows them to come together with mentors and address certain subject matters that may be of interest to them at any given point. So that's how we try to build that community. We also re-engage a number of our alumni, either as mentors, as board members. They also participate in the conferences as panelists. So it's really kind of awesome to see that. And that is a benefit of being here as long as I have. I've seen them come through as Point scholars, go on and come back as board members. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. What are some of the other challenges that LGBTQ youth face right now?
I think that our youth today, LGBTQ youth, I should say, are still they're still not accepted in many parts of the country, even in those areas that you would think would be most accepting, like in California, or New York. But every year we get applications from students who get turned away because of the religious upbringing. And so that has a huge impact on young people. And by the way, these are young people that have a belief in God and that are trying to reconcile who they are with what they've been told in their homes and behind the pulpits, and I think that continues to be a big part of it. And then, of course, with the Supreme Court decisions that came down, the three that literally hit our community directly right on, especially the work that we do, we are seeing that access or equal access to a higher education has become a bit more difficult to attend some of the areas that they'd wish to go to. So I'll give you one last one, which I found very interesting. I'm not going to tell you the university, but a university called us and said that they were going to have to take us off their website as a resource for students to apply for scholarship. By the way, we do the scholarship and the selections all on our own. It's not like we go through the university. We don't give them the money. The selections happens all at Point Foundation. But just having our name there, because it was a scholarship that was specific to LGBTQ students, they said they were going to have to remove from their website unless we were willing to change our mission because of Title IX and not wanting to discriminate. It's like, thank you, we'll handle this on our own. So...
Wow. Yeah. The audacity of someone to ask that of you.
They're going after diverse scholarship organizations as well that focus on racial diversity. They're starting to do the same thing, and they're grappling with how to support individuals that identify a certain way when in past they've been able to give the money directly to a university and have them distribute that money.
Straight, white, Christian, able-bodied people want so badly to feel discriminated against. It's just wild to me, the ways in which they'll invent problems and persecution. Yeah. It feels gross.
How do you answer the question if someone asks, like, why do LGBTQ people need their own specific scholarship?
Yes, I'm very happy to share that. And give me 1 second. Here we go. I just wanted to make sure that I had all of the statistics in front of me so I don't mislead anyone. First of all, when you look at LGBTQ students in high school to begin with, we're talking that the dropout rate among LGBTQ students is 3 times that of the national average because of the harassment, the bullying, the violence that they experience in high school, and they're twice as likely to report that they don't want a higher education. Like, why expose myself to more of that? And by the way, that's also why we started our community college program. Many of them that did want to go on to a post-secondary education didn't have the grades, didn't have the money because their families rejected them. 30% of students nationally start in community college. And so that's why we launched our community college program. But then let me give you some other statistics. 45% of transgender students of color report feeling depressed compared to 18% of white LGBTQ students. So when you have these individuals with intersecting identities in our community, even more so. 30% of transgender students say they've been denied access to gender-affirming bathrooms. I mean, my Lord, that's like a human right, basic right that we should all have. And 40% of students that are LGBTQ and have a disability report feeling excluded from a number of campus activities. So it's a question, Kyle, that we get asked quite often. Frankly, it's like, why do you still need something for LGBTQ students? The FBI reported in February that among the top 3 groups most targeted hate crimes, it is Black students, LGBTQ students, and Jewish students, not only in high school, but in colleges as well. So the need is there.
Wow. Do you think some people believe that we've all moved past that acceptance has gotten to a point where we don't need it? Like, is that what some people believe?
Absolutely. I'm sure that they do. They're always shocked when we provide statistics or when we're able to share with them a scholar's story, or they hear directly from a scholar and what they went through in their home or in their communities. But I do think that the ones that feel that way are the ones that are supportive. They're the ones that are allies or that are members of the community that live in areas that are very accepting of the LGBTQ community.
I was just going to ask if it's regional at all, because I find those numbers really hard to believe, but then also recognize that I live in this liberal blue bubble of Seattle. So, is there any? Do you have it broken down by region? Like, is it a rural thing?
It is a very rural thing, or it can be, and I would say for the most part it is. The interesting thing is that our scholars, many of them want to stick around and go to a local college or university to try and change that, because it's, and that's another thing that changed when you asked me what's changed, from when I first started. When I first came here, every student that applied for a scholarship was going to go on one of the coasts. It's either, East Coast, West Coast, where they felt safe, and rightfully so. We have seen a shift in that, with many young people wanting to stick around in their hometowns to try to change the conversation and be there for other LGBTQ young people. So that is, but yeah, for the most part, it is, areas that aren't exposed to our community as much, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I imagine, based on your description of your constituency, that you deal primarily with Gen Z folks right now, maybe a few of the younger millennials. But I know that Gen Alpha has a whole bunch of different sort of attitudes about a lot of stuff when it comes to queer rights and queer issues. How are you preparing for the change that's going to come with Gen Alpha as they get to college age?
One word: retirement. No, this is a conversation that we've had a lot of time discussing, because we've seen the shift. Somebody asked me recently if there was something that you wish could change about our education system. And I'll tell you what it was, but I want to preempt it by saying I think that that a younger generation has taught us the importance of really caring for yourself. I mean, the word self-care did not exist. I'm 61. It did not exist when I was around. To me, it was just like, what? You go to work when you're sick, and it doesn't matter. And I think that has been a real shift in understanding and feeling better by doing that, taking care of oneself. At the same time, the one thing that I commented that I am grateful for the leadership training that Point does is this whole cancel culture part, where, I went to school where you sat through conversations that did not feel good, to find a way to insert yourself in the conversation, to reach across the aisle. I worked in the Clinton administration, and my Lord, even then you could reach across the aisle, and have conversations. And it feels that at this point that the leaders, or the ones that are going to excel as leaders in the future, are those that are finding ways to sit in uncomfortable situations and listen, take a breath, go for a walk if you have to, and come back to that conversation, so that then you can share what it is that you feel in particular. And I think that's going to be a key for a younger generation of leaders. And look, a lot of folks that are leading nonprofits now are my age, or some even older, that are retiring. And there's this space there. And I think that's what's going to make young people stand out. And that's what we hope at Point Foundation, to help young people understand that, we all have many identities, and somebody is inevitably going to say something that's going to hurt one of the pieces of your identity. And how do you deal with that and help someone understand and learn and possibly grow?
Girl, you're doing great for 61. I have more gray hair than you do. But I want to ask, how would you rate people 60 and better and their ability to connect with this generation, the younger, the queer youth? Like, are they able to bridge that gap? Because it seems like a lot of time age can be the sort of friction point.
Yeah. I think that unless you are in a job in which you are working with young people and taking the time to learn where they're coming from and what motivates them, and that frankly, I see a lot of people my age and older that say, I'm not dealing with that. It's like that's somebody else's. That's the director. That's the manager that can deal with that age group. But I read a very interesting article a few months ago that talks about how you have this generation that you're asking about that really wants to teach, wants to mentor, wants to educate people on how to be successful in a work environment, but they're afraid of how it's going to be perceived because they get called into HR. Someone says, I didn't like the way they said I need to show up on time when I'm walking into the office or whatever it is. And so many have just given up. And so you have this gap of knowledge and leadership because they just want to get through their retirement. They don't want to be fired because they might have said something that was taken wrong the other way. I think it's both sides. I think both need to make an effort to understand and to learn. But as an older adult, I do think that it behooves me to take that step in understanding the generations that are younger.
What do you think the future of the Point Foundation has within it?
More students, more. I said this earlier, but there are thousands and thousands of young people that want some type of post-secondary education. And when Point Foundation started, it only supported individuals that were going to a 4-year or a graduate program. And we got to a place where we wanted to meet individuals where they were in their journey to a post-secondary education. And that can be vocational school, trade school. I mean, I think that's how people's minds and hearts are going to change as well. I mean, I want to go to a mechanic that's gay. I also want to feel safe if I don't know how to change the oil. I think it's every 3,000 miles, FY. But if it's, it's one of those things where I think I want to feel safe in whatever space I walk into. And I think if we're able to support individuals in any sort of post-secondary education, that's going to make life better for everyone.
Well, if you could say one thing to every gay Mormon kid or trans kid of color in the middle of the country, if you had just one sentence that they could hear, what would you put in their ears?
There's a huge community that is dying to wrap their arms around you and welcome you. You're not alone.
Oh,
that's lovely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate all your insight and everything that you shared with us.
Thank you. It's not going to be as fun as the podcast that the two of you do, which are very fun to hear, but thank you for the opportunity for people to hear about what Point Foundation does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Great. Let's take a break.
This is the part where Mike and Kyle take a break.
Are we back?
We're back.
We're back.
We're going to do our Gayest and Straightest.
We're going to do our Gayest and Straightest. But first, George, where can people find out more about you, maybe get involved in the Point Foundation? Tell us all the things.
Sure. First thing, we're on Instagram. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn. Our website is pointfoundation.org, and it's POINT Foundation. So .org. And we have some really exciting dates coming up. We have applications that are opening up for our BIPOC scholarship program and also for our flagship scholarships, which is for those that are going to undergraduate or graduate studies. Those open up September 10th. So go for it. There's money to give to students, and we want to help. So that's something that I would love for people to be aware of. And the other thing is that from October the 28th through November 1st, we have what we call Out in Higher Ed Week. And we do a series of things on, Instagram and just some good messages for individuals. We've often had a number of participants from professors and administrators that are members of the community that participate in that as well. So those are some good things.
Awesome.
That sounds great. Well, look for that. We'll put a lot of that on our social media too, so we can help get the word out. Hopefully.
Thank you.
But in exchange, can you teach us how to TikTok? Do you know anybody in your world? Because we're not good at it.
I actually do know someone. Email me afterwards, and I'll tell you who's very good at that. So.
Excellent. Well, our website is gayishpodcast.com.
We're on socials except for TikTok at Gayish Podcast.
Our hotline, you can send us text messages or leave us voicemails, is 5855-GAYISH. That's 585-542-9474.
Standard rate supply.
Standard rate supply. Oh my God, I forgot. It's the only time I've ever forgotten to say it. Oh
Wow.
God. Okay, go ahead.
I just felt so off kilter but with you not saying that. Our email is gayishpodcast@gmail.com.
And our physical mailing address is Post Office Box 19882, Seattle, Washington, 98109. Do we have any? I don't think we have any like announcements or scheduled things or anything coming up. No.
Send in if you have your ideas for the podcast send those into our email, or if you want to submit your Gayest and Straightest as a voicemail, please feel free to do that.
Rate, review, subscribe, and recommend, everybody. The 4 R's that makes the world go round. You ready for Gayest and Straightest?
Yeah, let's do it.
I nominate you, Kyle.
Okay. My Gayest is getting back on Grindr.
Yeah. Good work.
I got kicked off and now I'm back on. And so I was just spending a lot of time on Grindr this past weekend.
Okay. You were kicked off because you pretended to be a journalist. Is that right?
I don't know why. They said it was in error. So it must have been. No, I was interacting with a spam bot when I got kicked off.
Oh, okay. Great.
I was like, what is your or like someone trying to steal my information or do something. And I was like, what is the scam here? Like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah. I
kept trying to prod at this like bot thing.
Great.
And then I got kicked off all of a sudden.
Was the bot hot?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Surely they were, because it's always some like really hot seeming guy that's like in the military or something.
Yep.
My straightest is waiting for the trash to be like practically overflowing before taking it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Mike?
What about me? So the gayest thing about me this week, the building that boyfriend and I live in did a trivia event thing on Friday night. And I went, and I don't know anybody other than boyfriend here in the building yet. So I sat down and met some people, and these 2 really, really hot boys came and sat down. And I asked them, "How long have you been together?" They were roommates. Like they were not a gay couple. I just forgot where I was in my gay universe. I presume everybody's banging. And then the straightest thing about me this week is buying bulk underwear at Costco.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
I've given up on the cute briefs and famous like Andrew Christian bullshit underwear, and I just went full on like Puma brand big old bulk underwear.
Wow. Do we need to have a talk after this?
We need an intervention, I think, for sure.
Okay.
George, how about you? How about your gayest or straightest?
So my gayest was that I went to a knitting class.
Oh, nice.
The only guy there. I was trying to find a number of years ago something to take my mind off work, because it's always thinking about it. And it works. I did a couple of classes, but it had been a while. And I went again after a number of months. Forgot everything that I learned in the first few lessons, had to start over. And again, I'm like the only guy in that, in that group. So that probably was. And
I want to take up knitting because it's the closest I'll ever get to Tom Daly.
see, there you go. Yeah, let me tell you, he's not going to the knitting classes I go to. So then the straightest thing was that, and I know you don't believe it, but LA can get very hot sometimes. We're going to get to the hundreds this weekend this week. Yeah.
Yikes.
And so a few years ago, the air conditioner, one of the units kept blowing out, and it's the central air one. And I had to bring someone in. I finally got smart and watched what the guy was doing. They were literally switching fuses, just popping in new fuses. So I bought fuses in bulk, not at Costco, but if they did, I would. And I went in there and it blew, and I switched them, and I'm cool now. So
Wow.
George, HVAC repair is like the straightest category on our like graduated list of things that you could select
Yeah,
from.
that's pretty impressive.
Well, Jorge Valencia, Executive Director of the Point Foundation, thank you so much for being here and talking to us today.
thank you all.
Also, thanks to Art from Grindr for reinstating Kyle.
Thank you to Art for sure. Thanks for your hard work. You told me you were going to get me a month of free extra, and that hasn't come through. So, hit me up again
Hold 'em
and
to
make
it.
it happen. Also, I want to thank our super gap bridgers. Thank you to Locomotive, Kaylee Adams, Kit Oliver, Kobe Gordon, Squaggle, Pip, Andrew Bugby, William Bryant, John Crowley, Yost Osel, Jonathan Montanius, Forrest Nail, Steve Douglas, Explosive Lasagna, Michael Covington, Just Jamie, Thomas B, Dusty Sands, A. Coleman, Chris Cacciatorians, and Jerome York. Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your money. That's it. This has been Gayish from the Chris Cacciatorian Studios. I'm Mike Johnson.
I'm Kyle Getz. Until next week, be butch, be fabulous, be you.
See you next week.
See ya.
All right, we did it. Now what?